Hi guys, today's video will be a little bit different from the usual guides I've made. I won't be making a guide based on an entire gameplay, but I will talk about multiple heroes and will be using clips of their gameplays from my actual ranked games. This video is about how you should play any roamers in Mobile Legends. Previously, I've actually made 2 videos about a similar topic, which are basically about what you should build for any tanks in the game. However, as more updates are brought to the game, roamers can now be played by various different roles, not just tanks and supports, but assassins as well. This video will be slightly different from the previous 2 because I'm going to cover a wider aspect. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you will get updates whenever we upload a new video. And with that out of the way, thank you for clicking in, and now let's dive into today's video. First of all, I want to put a disclaimer in the beginning. This video is mainly based on my personal gameplay experiences and the playstyle that I find comfortable with and have a higher chance at winning. It might not all be the typical builds or playstyles you have seen before, and we might have different and controversial opinions, but that is totally fine. There are multiple types of roamers and multiple ways to play them as stated in the beginning of the video, and from my research and testing, all of them can work well in good hands, and of course, sometimes it requires teammates' cooperation as well. In my opinion, there are different categories of roamers playstyles, which are the defensive roamers, the utility roamers, and the damage roamers. So, let me start with the defensive roamers. Defensive roamers are generally known as tanks, and as the name suggests, you are a roamer, so you won't be building tank items that help you deal extra damage such as Curse Helmet and Thunder Belt too early on in the game, because your main purpose is to be a damage soaker, not a damage dealer. Among all the 3 groups of roamers I mentioned earlier, you are the sturdiest type of roamer due to the high base defense attributes like HP, magic resistance, and armor. One of the most important things to do is to be brave enough to engage in the fight. You should be the one initiating the team fights. Speaking of initiation, an important point I would like to point out is that in spite of your strong crowd control abilities, you are generally not capable of killing the enemies by yourself. So always wait patiently in the bushes when playing any defensive roamers or tanks. You should always take full advantage of the bushes when trying to set a fight. Staying in the bushes is basically making yourself a ward for your teammates. You provide vision of the surrounding enemies while they wouldn't know you are in it. Only when your other teammates are ready to gank the lane, you reveal yourself along with your full combo to catch them off guard. In short, you shouldn't reveal yourself too much on the minimap so you can have more successful ganks. The candidates of defensive roamers include 1. Strong crowd control abilities. 2. Free defensive stats from passive or casting specific skill. Not all the tanks are best to be played as a roamer tank, or should I say, they are better off playing the side lane such as Balearic, Glue, Marsha, and Uranus. Now, let's dive into the general build recommendation. Among all the 3 categories of roamers, I have most to talk about for the builds I recommend for defensive roamers, and I will break down the equipment you should purchase one by one. For the first item, is either one of the defensive boots, tough boots, or warrior boots. I wouldn't recommend getting other boots because these 2 are the only boots that strengthen your frontline battle performance. Your choice of the boots will be according to the main type of damage dealt by the enemy team, especially from their jungler. If the jungler is a magic damage dealer, get tough boots. If the jungler is a physical damage dealer, get warrior boots. If the jungler is a tank, then you don't really need to focus too much on the damage they deal. Instead, look at the majority type of damage dealt by the other teammates. For instance, if there are multiple magic damage dealers in different lanes, get tough boots. If there are more physical damage dealers, get warrior boots. Now, let's talk about the main core items as a defensive tank roamer. A lot of times, I see players tend to start off with Dominance Eyes as the first core item regardless of the type of damage dealt by the enemy core. Undeniably, this item is really useful and offers a lot of amazing attributes. Not only does it provide the second highest armor stats in the game, it also provides cooldown reduction, mana, movement speed, attack speed reduction, anti-heal, and shield. Despite being a really useful item, there are times that you need to focus on starting off with a different defensive item instead of it. You always have to take a look at the enemy composition before deciding what items is the best starter item. I will list a few orders to buy the first 2 core items for early to mid sustainability based on different scenarios. and after that, I will explain about the different items that you should build after the first two items. Scenario 1. Your enemy core is a magic damage dealer who deals 1 hit burst damage. For example, Karina, Guinevere, or Selena. When facing these enemies, you should start off with Athena's shield because it's most effective when it comes to reducing huge amount of magic damage. After getting Athena's shield, this is when you should get Dominance Eyes, not early on. The reason being, you need to stay alive before being bursted by the magic damage dealer before you can support your teammates. Getting Dominance Eyes at this stage is to sustain the damage from their marksman or to reduce the regen effect from their roamer or the experienced laner. Scenario 2. Your enemy core is a magic damage dealer, but they deal multi-hit or continuous magic damage. For example, Gusion, Amon, or Harley. When facing them, you should start off with Radiant Armor, or do the few mentioned above seemingly deal burst damage like what the others do. However, their damage actually comes from multiple tiny hits that add up together. Radiant Armor is what sustains you the most in this case. After getting Radiant Armor, this is when you should get Dominance Eyes. The reason is just similar to what I said just now, so there's no need to repeat. Scenario 3. Your enemy core is a physical damage dealer. This is when you should always start with Dominance Eyes because it offers a really high amount of armor as mentioned earlier. Also, its attack speed reduction comes in handy against most physical junglers. After getting Dominance Eyes, you will want to get either one of the two magic defense items as mentioned above. However, instead of looking at the enemy core, this time you look at the enemy mage. If the enemy mage deals burst damage such as Selena, Eudora, or Kagura, get Athena's shield. If the enemy mage deals continuous damage like Odette, Eve, or Chang'e, get Radiant Armor. Now that we're done with the first two defense items and the boots, we are now at the fourth item slot. At this point, your benchmark is the enemy marksman because it is mid to late game already. If their damage is mainly critical damage, or they deal damage per second, such as 1-1 or Moskov, you should get Blade Armor. This item is really effective because it reflects damage back to them based on the damage dealt on hit. Also, it slows them down for a brief moment when the damage reflection takes effect. Against critical users, this item offers another bonus attribute, which is critical damage reduction. On the other hand, if your enemy marksman deals skill damage, such as Brody or Clean, you will want to consider getting Anti-Cuirass. And lastly, if the enemy marksman deal magic damage, which is Nathan or Kimi, you should definitely get Radiant Armor if you haven't got one early on, but if you already got it earlier, then just get Athena's shield. The fifth item slot. I would recommend getting Immortality for any tanks as the fifth item. This is because while you resurrect, you will have a chance to survive more likely than the heroes from the other roles due to your attributes. Besides, it also gives your team a chance to make a comeback because the tank with crowd control skills is back, meaning another chance to win a team fight. The last item slot. The last item will be based on your preference. I would recommend getting Thunder Belt at this stage if you need more mana and slow effects. Otherwise, just get Guardian Helmet so you won't have to go back to base too often. By the way, you might have noticed I never included items like Cursed Helmet, Thunder Belt, Twilight Armor at all as an early game item. Those are the tank items for damage dealing tanks, not defensive roamers. Now I'm going to talk about heroes that can be played as defensive roamers. All the tanks that I listed here are recommended to be played as defensive roamers. However, sometimes you might even want to use fighters like Jawhead, Ruby, Sylvana, Matisse as a tank due to their overall design matches the conditions I stated earlier in the candidate section. While playing fighters as tanks, you use the same build as stated above. Now that we're over about defensive roamers, let's talk about utility roamers. Utility roamers are most of the OG support we have before all the tanks are added with the support sub-role. They are the heroes that give extra battle advantage to you, such as heals and shields. However, many of the heroes here have been shifted to playing the playstyle of the defensive roamers, aka building tank fully and basically just playing as another tank. I do understand most of them can do pretty well even with a full tank build with 0 magic items. However, I personally don't like that and I feel it's just overkill. Your playstyle. Always remember your keys are meant to be a frontline damage soaker, although sometimes you do need to sacrifice yourself a bit in order for your other teammates to survive. However, most of the time, you need to play more carefully and position well too. You basically stay behind or around the melee heroes when they try to gank the enemies while constantly spamming your shield or healing skills on them so they can sustain long enough in a fight. In other words, they are the ones who are meant to soak the damage, not you. I personally suggest building a more hybrid build, more on this later. Candidates: 1. Skills have good shield or heal scaling. 2. Spamming skills give overall better advantage. General build recommendation: in my opinion, you are always recommended to build some defensive items, but I don't like the idea of going full tank. Since you are already playing safe with all the positioning, unlike a tank but more like a mage, you just have to buy a few items that minimize your chances of being bursted too early, such as Athena's shield, Dominance Eyes, or Brute Force breastplate. Basically, what I mean here is that your item will be a little bit similar to the general build I mentioned for the earlier group of roamers. However, the last 2 or 3 items will differ here based on the type of supports you are playing. For example, in a tank session, I recommended you to get Immortality as your 5th item and getting Guardian Helmet as your last item. Instead of these 2 items I stated earlier, if the game lasted till really late and you are using a utility support, I would recommend buying magic items that focus on cooldown reduction, which allows you to keep spamming your game-changing healing or shielding skills such as Enchanted Talisman and Fleeting Time. Why? Because the more you are able to spam your skills, the more likely your entire team is going to gain an advantage. On the other hand, building extra tank item while positioning like a mage is just a waste, and it's not really going to help your entire team but only yourself to survive. Example of utility roamers: all the supports listed here are recommended to be played as utility roamers. Although the first few items are quite similar for most of the supports here, the last 2 items will differ based on your playstyle and your hero skill set. This is why I listed my recommended build next to the hero icon. Lastly, I will be talking about the damage roamers. Currently, there are only a handful of damage roamers in the game. Your playstyle. The playstyle as a damage roamer is basically to exert dominance over your enemies, especially the squishy heroes like the assassin, mage, and the marksman. You are to focus on shutting them down early on, while your core can farm peacefully or gank easily. Candidates of damage roamers include 1. Those who have high mobility or movement speed or fast rotation. 2. They can deal a good amount of damage once the game starts, and still have a pretty good damage scaling throughout the game. General build recommendation: unlike the other 2 categories I mentioned earlier, there isn't really a set of recommended builds that can be shared by most of the heroes under the same category, so I will just list their recommended builds next to them later on. Examples: some of the more popular ones include Natalia, Selena, and Grog. However, I would like to include Matilda as well. I think there isn't much further explanation needed for the first 2, but I do have a little bit more to talk about why I included Grog and Matilda. Since Grog got his revamp, he can now shine pretty well against physical damage dealers by just building physical items, which adds up his damage output and sustainability thanks to his high attack scaling for skill damage and his new passive, which offers a free 50% armor whenever he gets 1 point of physical attack. With that being said, he can pretty much ignore physical defense items but focus on building physical attack items for free defense. At the same time, just getting a few magic resistance items will make him a really sturdy tank who can still dish out a lot of damage as long as you make full use of his passive, which is by standing next to a wall most of the time. Although the changes are meant to make him perform better in the experience lane, I personally feel he is better off as a roamer due to his strong passive that allows him to rotate faster around the map. Besides, his burst damage isn't consistent enough for him to lane against meta fighter or tanks in the experience lane who already have a good sustain or defense. This is why it's better off playing him by rotating around the map and picking off squishy targets. For Matilda, compared to Grog, this might be more of a surprise. You might wonder why I included Matilda in this list. Well, she has the assassin role, and even in the current meta, she could still shine pretty well even when using a more aggressive build like what I stated here, and what the other damage roamers will build. I mean, if she has the skill sets and scaling, there's no reason why she can't be played as a damage roamer. For instance, her skill 2 has a shield of 180% magic power scaling with a base shield of 1000 in late game. Adding it up with magic power can still make her sustain pretty well as a support. Damage wise, her skill 1 has 100% magic power scaling, making her deal a juicy amount of damage. Besides, the passive, which is basically like a free and also an upgrade of Shadow Twin Blades, make her able to kill squishies really easily. In summary, I've covered the 3 types of roamers and their general builds and their playstyles in this video. I didn't talk much about the emblem setup because it will be a little bit different for every single hero here. There will be a video on the emblem setup later on, when the new talent system comes to the original server. So that's it for this video guys. I hope you learned something new, and if you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing. Thanks.